to Teach, Learn, Share, a podcast that thoughtfully explores teaching and learning practices in higher ed. I'm Margot Eckenberg.
And I'm Jasmine Parra. This podcast is brought to you by Teaching and Learning Services at McGill University. We're recording today from Montreal, Quebec, on unceded land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. We honor their stewardship as we live and work on these lands. So in this episode, we're back to talking about engagement and how it can support learning. And as you might remember, in a previous episode a while back, we spoke to two students and talked to them about their kind of version of what engagement means when it comes to learning. We also spoke to an instructor who guided us through one of their engagement strategies using an education technology called Mural. And today we have a little bit of a different episode, and we are going to be sharing clips from very short interviews that we had with students at McGill.
I'm so excited about today's episode. We've tried something new, and we're really happy to be bringing that to our listeners today. So as you were saying, we had the opportunity to speak to students on McGill's campus and ask them about being engaged in class, but you'll find out that we didn't really get into any pedagogical issues with the students, and we didn't even mention the word engagement. The idea was really to give students a place to be able to talk about why they like going to class. So we're going to hear about that in just a moment. So it's important to keep in mind, of course, that students don't know much about pedagogy and learning and how learning works, and they shouldn't. It's not their responsibility. But they usually intuitively know what makes it worthwhile to go to a class and how they want to engage with the material, how they want to engage with their profs and or with their peers. So the idea was to listen to student voices and then come together and talk about what students have to say. We also worked a little bit differently for this episode because we were interested in what students thought. We thought it would be really fun and a great opportunity to co-create an episode with a student. So joining us today is Hedy Jaza. I'm going to turn the mic over to him in just 1 second. But I did want to mention that we've co-created and worked together on every element of this episode. So planning, interviewing, and of course, recording today. So please go ahead and introduce yourself, Hedy.
Thank you, Margot and Jasmine. My name is Hedy Jaza, and I'm a graduate student here at McGill. I am doing my master's in education and society, and I have been a graduate student assistant with DLS since September 2024. This episode was targeted to get to know what engagement means for students. So we set up a table at the library and asked McGill students 2 questions to understand what engagement is for them. The first question was about their favorite class and a class that they liked attending this term. And the second question was about a particular activity that they liked in the class and made them like to go to the class even more.
So as we listened to the student recordings, one thing became very clear and this came up in the earlier episode with the 2 students that we interviewed as a part of the first episode of this mini series. Engagement doesn't look the same for everyone. For some students in that we spoke to, it was about feeling supported. For others, it was about being able to express themselves creatively or connect with their classmates. And sometimes it was about having fun and finding the content exciting. Engagement is deeply personal. It is multifaceted. What I found valuable in these conversations with students, and what I often find valuable talking to them, is just listening to them, not analyzing, not jumping in, not trying to problem solve, but just hearing what works for them and hearing it in their own words. So to kind of set up this episode, to make sense of what we heard, we've grouped the student responses into 5 key themes. They're not meant to be rigid categories by any means, but they're just a way that we're going to reflect on what actually drives engagement from the student perspective. And for each theme, we'll be sharing sound bites from the interviews, and then we'll talk through what they reveal about the learning environment, about the role of the instructor, and what we might take away or what you as a listener might take away as educators. So the first theme we have here, we've noted as the power of the professor. So let's take a minute to listen to what they had to say.
I'm not doing particularly great in it, but I like the vibe in class and the prof. Like, even though the material isn't the easiest, he always answers questions. And he's really like, what matters most to him is that we understand. So it doesn't matter to him whether we don't cover all the material he had planned out for the semester, as long as we really understand the key concepts. So I think that's why I appreciate it. Today we went over the midterm because we had a very bad class average for the midterm. And so he took the whole class to just go over it. He gave us our copies and he made sure that like he answered all of our unanswered questions. Like if there was any confusion, he like cleared it up for us. And the fact that he took the time, and even like next class, it's going to be a review session. It was really relieving because also it made me realize like I understand more than I give myself credit. And I just felt supported, and then it reassured me that like there's like the prof is like his goal is that we succeed in the class.
I wouldn't say an activity, and I wouldn't even say the course is fun. I just like seeing my prof. He's like the wizard of math.
I really enjoyed cognition because I found that the prof really made everything super interesting. She engaged the class a lot. She made us engage like with questions and, oh, can you find me examples of this or this? And she also had really interesting guest speakers as well throughout the semester. And I found she was there to help us throughout the semester, and the TAs as well.
For me, a huge takeaway listening to the students is how central their perception of their prof is in the course that they're feeling engaged with. So how they're really relating to them. So we heard more than once, I really enjoy being in that class. My prof is nice. My prof cares about me. My prof wants to see me succeed. So for me, that was really, really powerful, because something I took away too is that we might initially think that students are most engaged in the classes that they're doing the best in. So they're excelling, and then that's why they feel really engaged. But it was really eye-opening for me to hear, and I think it's absolutely true. The students aren't necessarily doing the best in the courses they're most engaged with, but there's something going on there that is making them want to learn more, want to go to class, want to really be engaging with their prof and their peers. In this case, we heard about the idea of how important it is to feel that your professor wants you to succeed in what you're learning.
Yeah, and I think something really interesting for me, it's not always easy to show up and be charismatic and be, flashy and have this big personality. But I think just the idea of offering this kind of safe space of feeling supported, feeling seen, Hiba, she mentioned how the instructor prioritized the students understanding the material rather than just the coverage of how much material they could jam into the course, taking that time to ensure that students are really able to grasp the concepts.
Another aspect that also might go unnoticed is the invisible emotional labor that professors put in to help their students succeed. Teaching does not have only to be about introducing a material, making sure that the students are succeeding in terms of grades, but also showing that the instructor cares, supports, and is present to build that trust and motivation. As you were mentioning, Jasmine, two students mentioned that energy that they feel in the class. And it really shows that what the professor prioritizes reflects what the students feel in the classroom.
I agree with both of you, but I feel that I also wanted to add the underlying importance of the notion of support and care and trust. So ultimately, what we're talking about here is a relationship. It's true that there are power relationships inside the classroom, but students who feel engaged are feeling engaged, I think, because of that recognition of a relationship that's being built between the instructor and the student, and also the wider community of the whole class, where there's really this sense of feeling recognized and supported. And I think in an institution too, where there are often very large classes, that's something that can make students really feel less invisible.
And I think like the interesting thing about this is that there's not really a lot of prep and effort that necessarily goes into making these small adjustments as an instructor. So it's not like having to redesign your course. It's really, I think, making these tweaks in how you speak to students, how you make them feel, how you're approachable, having office hours. And I've noticed like a few of the students just brought up something quirky and silly and fun that an instructor does in class, and how big of an impact that has on the students' perception of that class and then their motivation to go to that class. So I think it's important to note that some of these small changes you might consider making in bringing that type of energy to your classroom aren't going to require a lot of planning or work.
So for our second theme, we've grouped some of the students' clips into what we've called engagement through creativity and flexibility. Let's have a listen.
So before we had just normal assignments with questions that you have to respond and stuff like that, or comparisons. But right now we had to do like a movie pitch or a movie trailer. And basically you have to incorporate like the science or the like astrobiology of the class into the movie. So it's like a sci-fi like movie pitch. Or you could choose to do like a movie pitch or a trailer. So it gives you a lot of options, and a movie pitch is kind of fun and creative.
We had a weekly assignment that was just for a participation mark, but it was a creative assignment, which is very rare at McGill. But we got to do a journal every week that was one part like a visual representation of the readings or what you thought about the readings for that week and the discussions that we had in class, and then one page of writing. So our professor even was willing to share like art supplies with us and watercolor. And then we all got to share those journals 2 times throughout the semester with our classmates during class time, which was an interesting exercise for a class that was very like theory heavy. But it was challenging but helpful to like visualize concepts that are very like complex and definitely like not universal to other classes at McGill.
A recurring idea from what we listen to is that assignments, when they are creative and non-traditional, they offer a more personalized learning experience for students. This is something that I have experienced myself as a student, but also hearing my peers' opinions, it makes me reiterate the idea that when there are creative assignments, we are able to expand beyond the course material. We are able to use other elements that might not be seen in regular assignments or in final exams or in MCQs. So having an opportunity to show that students can share more about themselves in class through their creative work is an opportunity to express themselves, and we feel the sense of belonging to the course material and the connection with what we are studying. So whether it is a movie trailer in a science class, which brings the 2 elements of science and also arts, or whether having a reflective journal throughout a course helps students see their progress of knowledge and learning throughout the semester.
This reminds me of something that came up in one of our very first episodes of the podcast, the series on well-being and assessment, where we interviewed undergrad students. There was one student, her name is Jordan, who took a microbiology course and shared that students were given the choice to do quizzes, or instead of a quiz, they could choose to do a project, which was sort of open to interpretation. So students were using mediums like baking, like painting, like creating visual media to explain certain concepts in biochemistry, concepts like, I don't know, energy metabolism, for example. And I love this flexibility and the incorporation of creative elements for a few reasons. One being that it allows students to express their understanding and their grasp of concepts in different ways, sometimes in ways that they're more comfortable in, but also sometimes in ways that they may be less comfortable in, and students can choose to engage in things that perhaps push them out of their comfort zones. And sometimes that is a really good thing. And the second reason I find it valuable is because it encourages students to look at concepts that they're learning in a different light. So you really have to be comfortable with the concept of being able to communicate it creatively and to a potential target audience. Like, you really have to understand energy metabolism to be able to communicate it through a baked good. And thirdly, what's valuable here is that students sharing their projects or assignments with each other creates a sense of community. And the moments where students get to share their work is exciting because students look forward to seeing what other students have come up with for their projects, which leads me to my last point, is that these assessments can be really fun. And we obviously love when learning is fun.
I too enjoyed hearing about these different assignments. I think they help remind us of the creative possibilities that happen within a classroom. And I think something I wanted to underline too was that we don't have to think necessarily that because it's a more creative assessment task, that somehow that'll compromise the rigor of the learning happening. I think the student testimonials speak to how they actually are feeling more engaged carrying out these creative tasks, and that they themselves were able to, as you were saying, Jasmine, they felt obliged to change the way they were thinking about the content they were learning to be able to express it in a different way, and sometimes even across disciplines, like you were saying, Hedy, right, between the arts and the sciences. So I think that kind of plasticity and flexibility in being able to think about the content being learned, but express it in a personalized way, but also perhaps in a creative and unusual way, pushes students so that they really are feeling more engaged with what they're working with.
So theme number 3, we've titled Creating Community. Let's take a listen to what the students said.
It is my Spanish class, and I've enjoyed it the most because it has a more sense of community in the class. It's a very small class, so we're able to work in groups with everybody and get to know the students really well. I would say the teacher did a really good job at just making sure we were all comfortable with each other and getting to know each other. Like, the activities were very personal. Like, I know all my classmates' personalities in a way, and that was nice to connect with them. I found myself, like, this was the class I skipped the less in my whole McGill years. I would say it's wanting the sense of community and just waking up and knowing that I'm going to have a good class and feel good about it. And yeah.
I'm in a creative nonfiction class, and it's a writing class, and it's phenomenal. And there's a really great instructor, and it's just been the best. It's like such a small class, and it's very intimate, and it's just been like, I've learned so much in this class because it's a workshopping class. So you have to like write a piece, and then it's not done when you finish it. You keep going back and you keep revising, and then you read everyone's work. And you give everyone feedback. So it's a very intimate class.
So for this theme, creating community was apparent through students describing their favorite classes as feeling known, as feeling seen, connected, and emotionally safe in this environment. Community can mean different things for different people, but for students, it is a place where they have the social dimension of learning, where they are allowed to engage with their peers, to take risks, to open up, and also feel motivated to participate in one way or another. But this also connects us back that the instructor, the prof, is a big element of creating and fostering this community, which is relating to our first theme of the power of the professor. One of the students in their large math class having the professor's humor, patience, and genuine support and care are reasons why students show up to the class and why they feel engaged even at an early time, as early as 8 a.m. And another student speaking about how this collaborative environment that was created in their anthropology seminar, by creating these creative assignments, helped create this community, which relates us also to our theme too about the engagement by creating creative assignments that are non-traditional. Being able to create a community means also being able to show support to students and being able to provide an opportunity for students to be creative.
I think that that's such an important component of creating community and giving students that space.
I think in fairness, these students are talking about being in small classes, which is important to stay at an institution as large as McGill. I wanted to underline a couple of things. First of all, students do eventually get to smaller classes. I think when you begin your studies at McGill, you probably feel overwhelmed with the number of students. So certainly the kind of community that's going to be created in a small seminar or in a small writing class or a small language class is going to be different from a large class. That being said, I did want to bring up the previous episode to the one that we're recording right now, which is an opportunity that an instructor gives in a large class for students to connect in a different way. It's true. In Mural, which is an online collaborative whiteboard, where at least you get a sense of how some of your other students are responding to the class, and it's a place for sharing. And we also heard in that episode how students are invited to turn to one another and at least introduce themselves to a person they don't know at the beginning of the term. So again, this notion that you can foster a sense of community in a larger class, but of course, it's going to look quite different from what it will look like in a small class.
For our fourth theme, we've seen that meaning and relevance are very important in course design. We have seen that students were able to engage more when there are course material that is connected to real world content. So let us have a listen.
We discussed a lot of topics about, like political related, but we're not only focused on like legitimacy, we're also focused on some like more practical questions, like what we discussed, like population exclusion, according to like what U.S. government is doing right now. And we discussed about some poverty question in Africa and Asia, which is pretty like it's hard to solve right now. And we're basically not like doing the real thing, but I feel like it's good to know about like what the world is going on.
So I like this class simply because this teacher gave me more an academic approach to economics. So then I'm thinking more about doing a master's or continuing to graduate school than what I was thinking of before knowing this professor.
One of the strong threads here that we heard from the students is the power of relevance and that feeling of this matters and this is why it matters and this is why what I'm learning matters. So students talked about what felt meaningful in the class, what felt important, and not because the content was necessarily light, but because it was connected to something real and connected to something beyond the classroom, something they may be seeing in the news, something they may be seeing on social media. So I think that that's really important for instructors to do, to kind of place their course and their content within the real world. I mean, we're not existing in a vacuum in our classrooms here. So I think that creates really important connections and it makes things more memorable, makes things more meaningful for the students. And it's a good reminder too that content is never really neutral. It's probably very important in today's day and age. It's always has to be kind of framed in a certain way. And the way the instructor frames that content is also very important, I think, for students to realize and connect with.
I agree with you, Jasmine, when you mentioned how we can start off a topic by something we saw on the news and that we are in a context that is not in a vacuum, but also that can mean we can think of the relevance as in why it matters and to whom it matters. At the end of the day, we are in an institution and there are power dynamics, and it's really important for students to be able to situate themselves within that social and political context. In the future, we will be practitioners, educators, and so forth, and it is necessary to be able to see that context.
For me, thinking about this theme and what the students had to say was a good reminder of the fact that not only does the content have to be meaningful for students, but it can really highlight for them the connection between what they're studying at university and their future paths. I don't know if that's what comes to instructors' minds immediately when they think about engagement. So it was really interesting to think and hear from students about how what can be extremely motivating is hearing what your prof has to say about the choices that they've made about how they've teaching a given course and how that might actually decide your future career path. So for the last theme that we've organized our student soundbites into, we're thinking about assessment and matters related to course design. So we know assessment and learning are really intimately related, but we also know that assessment matters a lot to students. So it makes sense that they're engaged with the assessments in a way that maybe they're not engaged in other realms of a course. So let's have a listen to what the students say.
I like how the evaluation are separated because it's not very stressful on us. So there's like 3 assignments and 1 final exam. So I think it's pretty separated enough so that not too much weight is on one big thing, which I like, because most of my classes like 1 midterm and 1 final, and that's that. But this gives us a bit of time to like, learn everything, and then like if we fail or we get something wrong, then we can, make up for it.
I think it was really great because, the professor was very relaxed. He recorded all of his lectures, which isn't something that's pretty common in engineering, like, because they want you to show up to class. But he recorded all his lectures so people who couldn't come to class or people who are just studying can rewatch the lectures. It's very convenient. And yeah, I think that was one of the biggest reasons that was, yeah. Other than that, like, he's just a nice professor, chill dude.
So for the 5th theme, we've seen that the design of the assessments can help in reducing the stress for students. And this is in terms of having the weight of the course and the marks of the course distributed across multiple assignments. Or, for example, having more flexible deadlines. I remember one of my courses, we had an interval deadline. That did not mean that we had to submit by one date. We can submit any date within an interval of a week or so. So that was very helpful for me to be able to organize my time, but I also have reduced stress, especially towards the end of the term where a lot of papers are due, and having to balance those stakes and balance the workload helps students feel more comfortable in the class, feeling more able to contribute to the class, and being more engaged with the material to submit high quality submissions.
One thing that I thought was really interesting here, because we heard of it mentioned before by a previous student, Hiba, is the differing in perception on lecture recordings. And I think it's interesting because we get this question a lot as, educational developers, learning technology consultants, like, should I record my lectures? Is it going to stop students from coming if I give students the access to recorded lectures? And we can see here that 2 students have completely different perceptions. One appreciating having those lecture recordings, using them to study, which we know it can be very, very helpful. And then having another student say that the fact that the instructor didn't post their lecture recordings, that being helpful, and that pushing them to go to class. So I think it kind of just demonstrates that there is not one clear answer to this question of whether you should or should not post your lecture recordings. I think they can be valuable if you do share them. And I do see the benefit, and students obviously do see the benefit in them not being shared and kind of having that as a motivation to go to class.
I didn't want to end the episode without talking just a moment about one of the initial ideas that spurred our thinking about having this series on engagement and learning. And it has to do with what was perceived as an apparent mismatch between how instructors were feeling about student engagement and then what students themselves believe. So we had the opportunity not too long ago to ask instructors at McGill. We polled more than 100 instructors on the idea of whether they thought students were less engaged now than they were previously, and a vast majority of them believed so. But having the opportunity to do this podcast episode, to listen to students, give them a space to talk about how they do engage, really encourages me to think that there is a mismatch in perception. And not only are students engaged, I think they're engaged in all kinds of different ways, as we've hoped to explain over the course of this episode, in really different ways that speak very much to who they are as individuals, but also can be representative of a diverse student body at a large institution like McGill. In closing, I wanted to give thanks to Hedy for not only being here recording with us today, but thank him for crafting the episode alongside Jasmine and myself.
It has been really fun working with you both, Margot and Jasmine, and I'm looking forward to other opportunities to engage with questions about engagement.
Yeah, this episode was so much fun hearing from the students. I mean, it always is. It always is. We always say that too, but it was such a good opportunity to kind of get their thoughts in a sort of informal unplanned way. Like we really, we should mention this. Like we sat in the library and we recruited random students that were walking by. So like all of these responses were really off the cuff and in the moment. And so truly, I think, authentic in a way because of that, because they were so unscripted and students were really just expressing what they enjoy about their education and specific, classes or strategies that they enjoyed. So I found that to be really cool. So I want to thank you all for tuning in, and please subscribe to Teach, Learn, Share and let others know about it.